Since burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddhas smell it from afar. Auspicious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage and offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. They've been having a home built for a couple of years, and they just have not been able to get it finished and get into it. And I hadn't seen them for a couple of weeks, and I heard they were finally moving in, still not finished, but they were moving forward to it. But when I saw them, it brought me such joy. That's the thing about having joy, altruistic joy, joy in the successes of others, because that's what takes us to a place of ultimate, not only equanimity, because if you think of equanimity, that's a peace within oneself. But if you think about boundless generosity, a vast mind that does not land anywhere, can you see that joy in the successes of others is what takes you there? And so just walking in the door, and I got chilly bumps, as Michael says, just walking in the door and seeing them there brought me such joy, as if it were my own joy. So I remember when I used to be in the Pentecostal church, the little storefront church, and one of the members of the church bought a Corvette, and I so rejoiced for her, even though she was mean to me, even though she was I don't know, we just didn't get along, and she was one of the pastor's children, and so I had no choice. I mean, either go somewhere else or just be there with that. And because of other things happening within my own spiritual development, I chose to be there with that. But when she bought that car, and as she expressed her joy over that car, something rose up in me before I understood anything about the Brahma Viharas being cultivated within myself. Sometimes you experience something, then later you learn what that was. Sometimes you learn something, but you don't experience it, and later you experience it. And sometimes you learn something, and there is that instantaneous entering into the truth of it. So we don't know how things are coming for people. I'm just saying they come different ways for different people, and they come different ways for the same people, and they come, so we can't put anything or anybody in a box. That's part of what not a mind that doesn't land here or there or anywhere in between is about, is learning just to take everything on as it is arising and try to see, have the wisdom to penetrate and see what is there for you that's useful and that's beneficial for yourself and for others, and just go with that, And so it'll make life so much simpler when you're going through good times, the joyous times. It will keep the fear from arising that this will leave. And when you're going through sorrowful times, it will keep the fear from arising that something is being taken away from you. You don't have to clutch hold to anything. And so later, I had a desire for a particular car. I liked the Cadillac. That was my go-to car in my worldly years. And every year, well, not every year I bought one, but every one I bought was a Cadillac, when everybody else was into the BMW. That to me was like a hard ride bicycle that's so hard, but a Cadillac was so cushy and comfortable, and I just liked them. But I remember when I bought mine, and I told the story about, so I'm not going to tell it today. If you missed it, you'll hear it at some point in time, about going to someplace like a Ford deal, not knocking Fords, for all those of you who like fix or repair daily. But it was a Ford Dodge, Senate Dodge. And I only had like $500 on me to put down on. It's a used car dealer, not just a used. And he said, go look out on the lot. You can have anything you want. I went out there and I saw this Cadillac. I saw this red Cadillac. And I said, I want that. My brother said, well, go. And he said anything. I said, John, he didn't mean this, though. He said anything. Go back and tell him that's the one you want. So we went back in. He said, how much you got? I said, $500. I said, good. And he wrote up a contract, and I drove that car off the lot. The next day, he went into bankruptcy. So he was just getting whatever he could get that day. But I got a car. I got a Cadillac for $500. And so you just never know how things are going to turn out. They can turn out good. They can turn out not so good. You can't be attached to it. But what you can know is that there is the law of cause and effect in. And I believe that was the seed of ripening of a good cause. Not that I didn't have some bad ones that could have come to fruition, because I did and I do. But because I believe that was a good seed that ripened, just so happens, thank goodness. And I believe it was because of my rejoicing over my enemy's good fortune, because she really did everything she could to tear down my spirit and run me from the church and all of that, but I kept trying to love her, because that was Jesus's commandment, and I kept trying to live the commandment. So everything we do for ourselves. Now we have, and once I come through the door, I see Rob, and Rob and Jane just had a baby, little teeny baby, teeny baby. But they have been able to bring, is it Teo? Is that how you pronounce it? His name is Teo. It means divine gift or heavenly presence. It's so beautiful. And so I'm coming over, Rob I'm coming soon. I'm coming this week. I have to tell Rob, I said, Rob, I haven't even seen my own grandchildren. I think I got great ones too. I do. I think I about, I don't know, 13, 8, something. I don't know. But I haven't seen them. But they know that I am about my dharmic business, and they have given me that freedom. So don't feel like I haven't cared, because I really do care. And I'm coming. I started to come with sister, but until she said, so you could get some sleep. I said, so he can get some sleep. Oh no, I told him. I told him about that. When you have them, yeah. He's talking about day 7, and this is a hard job. Okay, let's get serious into our Dharma talk for today. Yes, please. Hold on, she's gonna give you mic.
In the hospital after 6 days, my wife was like biting on me for something, and the nurse came in. She's like, just so you know, husbands can't do anything right in this space. The second you accept that, you're gonna be all right. She's like patted me on the bum and sent me on my way. So
but he's committed to getting it right, and I'm so very happy for the two of you. So for the last couple of weeks, I think on a Tuesday and then on a Thursday, we were, I think, studying in part and reflecting on the Bahya Sutta in the Udana canon. And I wanted to make sure that you really understood this sutta, because I think it's very important. And I wanted to use it as a way of teaching you how to use the suttas as a way of understanding Dharma principles, or seeing through and penetrating to Dharma principles. Otherwise, it just becomes a study. And I don't think the Buddha put quite as much emphasis on intellectual pursuit as he did on really penetrating the truth and the meaning of things. So I promise I won't bring this sutta up again this year, but I do want to go over it one more time. And this time I'm going over it paragraph by paragraph, so that you can see how much is actually in a sutta and how many different areas of liberty and insight it can bring, so that when we are doing our cultivation, we're not just working on one thing. I'm working on my patience, I'm working on that, but so many erroneous views and unknown things are crumbling that we're not even aware of being broken down. That's why we can have a sudden deep insight, or we can have a shift in our consciousness, and we're not really sure how that came about, because we didn't realize these things in the background were crumbling. So it's like I saw a picture of a not an iceberg. What do you call them in the Arctic? A glacier, and how it just fell, this huge thing, and you wonder how did that just fall? But something has been, the warmer water seeping into it, breaking down the structure of it bit by bit, until it just reaches a tipping point that it can no longer sustain itself. That's how the structure of appearances shift for us, and we don't recognize they're shifting the same way we don't feel ourselves second by second getting older, but we are. And then one day something happens, something breaks, something aches, and one is confronted with one's mortality, And so enjoy the suit. It says, thus have I heard at one time the Lord was staying near Savati in the Jedda's Grove, Anapandikas Park. And at that time, Bahi of the bark cloth was living by the seashore as Suparata. He was respected, he was revered, he was honored, he was venerated and given homage, and was one who obtained the requisites of robes, alms, food, lodging, and medicines. Now, the Buddhist sect they weren't the only homeless group of ascetics. They were just one. They lived in a country where, as one moved towards the end of one's life, they spent their first quarter of their life, focused on themselves, then focused on their family, focused on their career, and the last part of their life, in trying to prepare for the next life. We don't know a lot about that last part. And the Buddha said, don't wait until you're old, because then you can't do much. And so, this was a normal way of living in India at this time. And they all wore like refuse rags, clothes they took off of dead bodies, things like that. And the Buddha just had, because people asked, his disciples said, we look like all the other ones, we want to look distinct. And so the Buddha said, okay, well, while he was thinking about what they said, he looked out and he saw a rice paddy. He said, okay, then sew them up in the form of a rice paddy. That's how we got the rice paddy things. It wasn't because Buddha wanted to give us something special, that because he wanted us to look distinct, or even, that it has that much significance, even though we make a big deal out of some of these things. And I think he sort of did like he does, like, I don't want to spend my time going dealing with all of this. If that's what they need, then at this stage of who they are, well, just give them that. And he had them, like shave their heads, because everybody was like the matted haired people that didn't comb their hair, nits and bugs all in their head. And so he said, it would be healthier for you to stay clean. And so he gave them instructions on tidying up. Of course, he was he was in the warrior class, and his father was a chieftain of one of the it's more than a village provinces, but now they just call him, his father was a king and he was a prince. It wasn't exactly like that. And so he had the finer things in life. But people who were becoming his students, his disciples, because they wanted to get off the wheel of samsara, and they could understand the teaching, because karmically they had little dust in their eyes, then he began to teach them how to clean themselves up, how to do things, not to chew, not to talk with food in their mouth, spitting all over the place. I mean, so a lot of the rules are just about fine manners, and so these were the things he had to teach. They weren't like about spiritual things as much as they were fine manners, so that when they did speak about these enlightened things, that people would be inspired to listen and to hear, especially those who were in a greater karmic circumstance than they were. And those people, other princes, other kings, wealthy merchants, became their benefactors, took care of them and allowed them to get this message across. And so the Buddha was very smart in how he built, a foundation for the teaching, so that they still endure, even though we may be at the Dharma ending age, because the counterfeit has come in. When the counterfeit comes in, the true teachings leave. But it allowed, even now they're still here and we can still benefit. It says that, the key part of that word ending is ing. That means it has not ed'd, it has not ended, it's ending. So we still have a chance. How wonderful is that? And so it says, now while he was in seclusion, this reflection arose in the mind of Bahia of the bark cloth. Am I one of those in the world who are arhants, or who have entered the path of arhatship? This reflection arose in Bahia's mind, right? He was asking himself, yes. 1.10. No, UDANA. UD. UDANA. So he says, now, while he was in seclusion, this reflection arose. So when we're talking about cultivating and constantly reflecting, you see, that's why reflection is so important. And he asked himself, had he done what needed to be done? Had he overcome the world? Had he reached that arhat stage? He was respected, revered, honored, venerated, and given homage. But yet this question came in, not because you say I have attained, but have I really? That was his question. It says, and then a Devata, who was a former blood relation of Bahia of the bark cloth, understood that reflection in his mind, and being compassionate and wishing to benefit him, he approached him and said, you, Bahia, are neither an arhat, nor have you entered the path of arhatship. You do not follow that practice whereby you could be one. Now, a Devata is one of the beings that live in one of the heavenly realms, and there are many, many different realms of existence. And you have your above the human realm, you're going to have the Asura realm, then you're going to have the Deva realms, and then you're going to have the Brahma realms, and they're and there are many more realms than just those that we call, and then you have your formless realms, and then you get to the Pure Lands. And while some of them are talked about in the Suitors, it doesn't mean that you have to hold on to that number like they're only 31. It's just know that they are there, and these are streams of consciousness. And one can think they're in it too, especially if they're not teachable, especially if they, are not open and don't really want to know, just because they know something. And those people, it's not a lot you can do with them, but just let them, they will have failure after failure after failure, even though they're reaching for something right, even though they're reaching for something pure, because they're not teachable. They're not willing to ask the question. And through their sincerity, the perfect teacher will come that can give them the words that can put them on a path that they can hear. And that can be a worldly teacher. It can be a heavenly teacher. It can be a Devata, could be one from the God realms. It can be Mahasattvas. It can be Bodhisattvas. It can even be terrestrial beings. There's a lot of different kind of beings here besides just animals, insects, and humans. So you should look at some of our photographs sometimes. Oh, and ghosts. You should look at some of our photographs sometimes of the light beings that we capture in the courtyard. It's just wonderful. And so So here's the first thing that I'd like to, wait, no, I'll save it. And so he said, then, so Bahia said, then in the world, including the devas, the heavenly beings, at least at that level, who are our hearts? Who has entered the path of arhatship? And the Devata said, there is Bahia in a far country, a town called Savatthi. There the Lord now lives, who is the Arhat, the fully enlightened one. That Lord Bahia is indeed an Arhat, and he teaches the Dharma for the realization of Arhatship. That's the purpose of the Dharma, not to be happier without things, not to overcome depression and anxiety. It's for overcoming samsara and the wheel of conditioned existence. And some of those other things get tossed in there too, but that's not the purpose. So, when you shoot for the bullseye, and I mean, some of these other things you will get and they will benefit you, because the bullseye will take the sting or the pain out of life, and you can enjoy whatever you have, and you can be okay with whatever you don't have, and you can enjoy what you win, and you can be okay with whatever you lose. And so this is how life can become for us. And when we have actually inherited the truth of that, then we can instruct others along the way. And it's the highest and the best offering that we can give people, to be able to instruct them in that way. And so it says, then Bahia of the bark cloth, profoundly stirred by the words, profoundly stirred. So much stirred, that means that he did something, he put action behind it. He didn't say, oh, that was a good Dharma talk. No, he was so profoundly stirred that that he immediately got up and he departed from where he was. And it said he had to go to far, so they didn't ride in ox carts, they weren't on horseback. They had to walk wherever they were going. But and it said that he went there, stopping only from one night everywhere along the way. He went to Savatthi, where the Lord was staying in the Jeta's Grove at Anapandika's Park. And at that time, a number of bhikkhus were walking up and down in the open air. And then Bahia of the bark cloth approached those bhikkhus and said, where, reverend sirs, is the Lord now living, the Arhat, the fully enlightened one? We wish to see that Lord who is the Arhat. So that means he didn't sneak off in the night. In the I forget his name now. In the Bible, there was a certain Nicodemus, and Nicodemus snuck off to see Jesus by night. Because he was a man of stature and a man of power and a man of and he asked him, how can I get what you got? You've stirred me in my heart, and Jesus told him, well, you just keep all of these rules. Just do this. He said, I've done all those things since I was a child. I've done those things. He said, well, just do this. He said, I've done all of those things as well. He said, okay, here's the last thing. Sell all you have, give it to the poor, and come go with me. He said, and said Nicodemus went away very sad, because his possessions were very great. And so they said to him, our Lord Bahia, Bahia, the Lord has gone for alms food among the houses. And so Bahia hurriedly left the Jeta Grove and entered the city. And he saw the Buddha walking for alms food. Saw him as pleasing, lovely to see, with calm senses and tranquil mind, attained to perfect poise and calm, control, perfected one, watchful with restrained senses. And on seeing him, he approached him. He fell down with his head at the Lord's feet and said, teach me Dharma, Lord, teach me Dharma, Sugata, so that it will be for my good and happiness for a long time. And upon being spoken to thus, the Buddha said to him, it is an unsuitable time, Bhaya. We have entered among the houses for alms food. Now, you notice that this was a plural. He said, we have come to see, right? He says, we have come to see. So that means he didn't sneak there by night to go over to the master and get some answers and then go back like they were his and teach them to everybody, like he had this great insight. He went there and he took his whole group with him. That's why I'm taking, anybody who wanted to go, I'm taking the whole group. I took them out, took all the monks and nuns out to see Buddha Master. I could come back and I could tell these things and they would sound wonderful, but it wasn't my wisdom. I was trying to really get it and assimilate it myself. And so taking them out and it bore fruit. And now going out again so that we can come back and we can teach it the empowerment that is required. And it requires a certain honesty. It requires, a certain surrender, internal surrender to what is true. It required a certain shifting of the ways that I hold things and present things and carry things. But the conviction was there because the meeting occurred and I saw with my own eyes and the movement in consciousness that occurred caused me to lose half the song. They're like, I don't know what she's talking about now, but I'm not sure I want to go. I understand there's many places, or maybe not that many places. Maybe they have to catch it next time around. But the few that stayed, it will be for your benefit and for your welfare. And so he took his whole group and they went. And then when he saw the Buddha, he said, teach me the Dharma. Teach to me as you know it. Teach me that. And the Buddha said, it's not the right time because we're on alms rounds. And it said in the second time, he said, it is difficult to know for certain, revered one, how long the Lord will live or how long I will live. Teach me Dharma, teach me Dharma. So Sugata, teach me Dharma, Sugata, so that it will be for my goodness and happiness for a long time. And the second time the Buddha said, it's an unsuitable time by him. And a third time, Bahia said, it's difficult to know for certain, revered one, how long the Lord will live or how long I will live. Teach me Dharma, Lord, teach me Dharma, Sugata. And after the third time, the Buddha taught him and he said, here, Bahia, you should train yourself thus. In the seen will be merely what is seen. In the heard will be merely what is heard. In the sensed will be merely what is sensed. In the cognized or known will be merely what is known. In this way, you should train yourself. Now we start to realize something, that we don't have to get everything. We just need to get what we need to get. And that's what opens the doorway to liberation. And that's what starts to break down the need for lineages in the way that we have put them together. We just need the Buddha Dharma. That's what we need. And the Buddha Dharma, by its own power, seeps into us in such a way that it fills the empty spots, the crevices, and what we're missing that makes us whole and complete and lacking in no good thing. That it is alive and it is vital in this kind of way. And so he just tells them that. Now notice, he didn't speak of all the sense gates, right? And the sense bases or their contacts. He didn't talk about the tasted. He didn't talk about the touch. Now, somebody's going to read this and say, oh, they're only 4. They're not 6. No, he didn't say 6. He said 4. Somebody's going to read this Suitor and say, no, there were only 4. And somebody else is going to read the Suitor when he talked about 5. He left off mine because he was talking to them about external things. And somebody's going to talk about, no, he said 6. And we're going to get into a dispute about whether it's 4, 5, or 6 bases, what we see here, taste, touch, smell, or thing. And that's how we get off into these kinds of things. And we miss the important parts. Looking for what it is in there that we can use to cure our sickness. And so, so he said, in this way, you should train yourself. And when Bahya, for you in the seen is merely what is seen. He said, for you, in the cognized is merely what is cognized. In you, what is merely the heard. In you, what is merely the sensed. When you have trained yourself that way, he said, when you have trained yourself that way, you will not be with that. When you're not with that, you will not be in that. And when you are not in that, then you will be neither here nor there or beyond, nor between the two. Just this is the end of suffering. So sometimes we suffer because we're clinging so tenaciously to something, even a good something. We're clinging so tenaciously. We can go with something, but we don't have to cling to it. I was talking to a sister the other day, and she called. She said, I really need prayer because I'm so upset right now. And I said, what you upset about? She said, because I'm trying to do something because I just want to help people and blah, blah, blah. And she was going on and she says, and these people are not getting it. And I'm not going to play these games with them. And I'm like, how can you go to somebody's place and tell them what you're going to do and what you're not going to do? And you want to make them do what you want to do. Why? If you go to their place, why don't you see and do what they're doing? I said, you have a wrong view about that, sister. And until you get a right understanding about that, you'll be rejected. And it's not anybody's fault, but you're clinging so tenaciously. Yes, you have a good aspiration. Don't you think those people do too? And so, but you have to be able sometimes to hear something to get it. Somebody has to love you enough to tell you the truth. And then have to be patient enough with you until it can sink in. I know a lot of things did not sink in with me for a long time, and some still haven't sunk in. So, understand that. I know you do too. Because we're all pretty much alike. That's why we're all here in this samsaric world together. This is our work, both collectively and individually, to the extent we understand individuality, right? Okay. And so looking at what the Buddha said to him, he was pointing him to what he needed to really, really penetrate. Remember, he had said, the Devata said to him, no, you're not an Arhat because you have not even been introduced to the path that leads to that. Now we're starting to see something about Bahya that we didn't know before. And he says, now through this brief Dharma teaching, I got so many Dharma books. I mean, the canon is just full of books, just full of teachings. It says, now through this brief Dharma teaching, of the Buddha, the mind of Bahia of the Baklal was immediately freed from the taints without grasping, because he was all in. He had come from a far distance, and either he had to have some attainments, and he probably did. What kind of attainments? You can look at Majjhima Nikaya 128, and there was one about transportation, being able to move so fast that you can cover broad distances, or you can leave here and appear there. I mean, there are all kinds. I've had masters who had some of those powers. I didn't get any of them, but I know for a fact that they had them because I witnessed them, And so he says, after he gave him this immediate instruction, this brief introduction, Bahia went his way. And not long after the Lord's departure, a cow with a young calf, departure meaning when he left the city and he was going back to the forest where the bhikkhus were, where he was taking the food and they were going to eat, not long after the Buddha's departure from the city. A cow with a young calf attacked Bahia of the Baklal and killed him. And when the Lord, having walked for alms food in Savatthi, was returning from the alms round with a number of bhikkhus, on departing from the town, he saw that Bahia of the Baklal had died. And seeing this, he said to the bhikkhus, take his body, put it on a litter, carry it away and burn it, and make a stupa for it. Your companion in the holy life has died. Very well, Reverend Sir. Those bhikkhus replied. And taking his body, they did that. And then they went to the Buddha, prostrated and sat down to one side. And they asked, what is his destiny? What is his future rebirth? Now, this brings us to a conclusion. One, Bahia of the Baklal was not a disciple of the Buddha, because the Devata told him when he asked, is there anybody enlightened? He said, yes, there is one enlightened. He's far, far away. You can go there and there you will meet him. So he had not met the Buddha. He was not a disciple of the Buddha. He was not practicing in the Dharma, what we'll call the Dharma now. He was not practicing according to the Buddha's way. And yet the Buddha called him the bhikkhu's brother in the Dharma. So we have sisters and brothers who are not in the Dharma, but we can bring them into the fullness if we can accept. If we can accept them, if we can accept their work, the practice, what they have understood, and what their great aspiration is, and have the skillfulness to work with them in a certain way. Otherwise, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who are we doing it for? The Bodhisattva path requires this. It's not just for ourselves alone. And so I think when everybody reads this sutta, they miss that. They miss that he was not a follower of the Buddha. He honored him, and he only gave him 4 lines. Didn't walk with him, a long time. Didn't even have to give him that much instruction. He saw that he was so close. They only had to give him those 4 lines. He saw his tenacity, how far he'd come to get it. He saw his humility, even though he was revered and honored by everybody, and he had his own crew, that he would humble himself and say, teach me the Dharma. That he would even fall on his face and put his head at the feet of the Buddha. That kind of humility. That he would have the wisdom to know that karmically, not even the next minute, did I mess it up? Not even the next minute is promised. He said to the Buddha, you know, like, who knows, you might die, or I might. He didn't say, I might die, or you might. He said, the Buddha, listen, you might die. And I might die too. But he was still outward focused. He appealed to him. He says, what if you leave and I don't get it? You know, now I could easily leave, but what if you leave, you possess it, and I don't get it? Who had a thought that Buddha Master would leave? He's 58. Especially right after he gave us a charge, before we could even put it into practice. Now we have to figure out how to do it. But as we go through this, figuring it out, there's a wisdom that we're gathering for ourselves that cannot be disputed. One that's rising up and coming from the inside. And we know the veracity and the power of it, internal. And because the Buddha saw his conviction, saw that he was all in, and I'm pretty sure knew that he'd be dying in a few minutes, but wanting to make sure that for himself, not for the Buddha's sake, but for his own sake, that he was all in, making him ask 3 times. He gave him what he needed. And then the Lord said, where neither water, nor yet earth, nor fire, nor air gain a foothold, there gleam no stars, no sun sheds light. There shines no moon, yet there no darkness reigns. And he's speaking about the intrinsic Buddha nature, that which comes before all compounded things, before all that we call reality, what we call a illusory reality of compounded things, creates a dichotomy of this and this, of light and dark. It sets up a dichotomy. And because of the lightness and the darkness, we are blinded. He said, but when a sage, a Brahmin, has come to know this for himself through his own wisdom, Then he is freed from both form and formless, freed from both pleasure and pain. Short, profound, to be apprehended by the wise. I think this is one of the greatest suitors of all the suitors. We learned so many things in it that can help us on the path when we get stuck in our spaces about what we think we know, when we get stuck in our spaces about what we think we don't know, when we get stuck in our spaces about what our particular sect or group says, when we get stuck in our doubts or in our fears, when we get stuck in our accomplishments, when we are confused, and when we can't like just learn to rest and abide, not a thing not having to be this or that. So when we talk about the middle way, it's not the middle of those. It's like the capacity to rise above everything. It's like if you're in the middle of the forest and you look out, you can't see the forest for the trees. But when one is perched, at the pinnacle of the mountain, they can look out and they can see the whole forest. And they can pick their spot, pick their destination. And this is the great promise to those of us who have the good fortune to find a good teacher. And I'm not talking about me. I'm passing on teachings. I'm sharing the salient point of teachings. Who find good friends in the Dharma. Who have something worth talking about to talk about. Who teach us the way to live in harmony and fellowship with each other until we find joy in fellowshipping with each other. Who find the peace and the serenity from knowing that someone has your back, that you're safe. It finds ways of living a more simpler life. Simpler, but not making it difficult for others so that you can be simple. That means doing what you need to do to also make their life simple. It means looking around and seeing what needs to be done. And if it passes your screen and you have the capacity to do it, just simply do it. Without looking to be praised for it. Needing to be praised is suffering. Yeah? Needing to be thanked is suffering. Not being praised is suffering. Yeah. Not being thanked is suffering. We can find the things that we need to do and find the joy in finding the things that need to be done. And then you'll begin to discover that mind that is neither here nor beyond, nor in between. I think I'm gonna stop right there. Thank you so much for coming today. May you be well and happy and peaceful. May no harm come to you, no danger. May you always be able to meet the inevitable difficulties of life.